there is the famous Chrysler crisis. You will see that the needle will start shaking just a little bit, and as the needle starts shaking a little bit, that's air going in and out improperly through the intake. This car should be idling at about in between 500 and 700 RPMs instead of 1500. And here we go. Here is the infamous, there is the famous Chrysler crisis right there. And even here, you can see that the engine is idling rough and jerking. And it's all because air is going through the seals of this intake, which is common in these engines. And today, we're going to fix that lightning bolt. Welcome to another Garage Time with Goody. Today, what we're going to be working on is a 2010 Chrysler Sebring 2.4 liter engine. Let's get to it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take this engine shroud off, this plastic shroud. It just pulls up, and I'm going to set it to the side. The intake that we're going to be taking off is mounted right here on the front of the engine. Not for sure how well you can see this, but it's made out of plastic. It's right here. It's covering these 4 holes. That is the intake. This 2.4 engine is more notorious for this Chrysler crisis, as I call it, to happen. The lightning bolt, like it will happen in the 2.4 Dodge Journeys, the Jeep Compass, Jeep Patriot, Dodge Caliber, and of course this is a 2010 2.4 Chrysler Sebring. So like I was saying, some of the symptoms, it's going to be a rough idle, you're going to lose acceleration power, the car's not going to want to go above between 30 and 40 miles per hour. It can go into limp mode, meaning that it won't shift out of second gear, and also eventually the car's engine is just going to eventually shut off. And it can be a few things like the car's battery, it can be the just the throttle body itself, it can be other variables, but one of the main known problems on these engines is the intake gasket around the intake, that it fails and it lets in too much air and it idles too fast. It lets too much air into the engine and it throws that code. The lightning bolt comes up, and you could be on the freeway, you could be anywhere, and it's going to slow you down. It's very dangerous, and you just want to get it taken care of, and you don't want to be stranded on the side of the road somewhere. Or worse yet, you don't want to get into a wreck. So the thing I'm going to start trying to do is I'm going to start unhooking these fuel injectors, the fuel line. I'm going to start unhooking the vacuum hoses, and I'm going to unhook all the electronics that is surrounding the intake, the manifold. Now the first thing we want to do is unhook the battery. Anytime you're working with anything electronic, unhook the battery. And this battery is a pain in the ass because it's located, like on most Chryslers, up underneath behind the wheel well, usually either the driver side wheel well or the passenger side wheel well, and makes it a little harder to get to, but perseverance is the key here. Now normally what people do is they have an evap smoke machine that you would unhook the hose in the back, and the smoke goes to the vacuum hose and it goes down into the intake, and it would push smoke through there, and wherever the smoke escapes from around the intake or the vacuum hoses, that's where your leak is. Unfortunately, I don't have that tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace the intake manifold gasket. I'm going to start out first by removing the filter box. I'm going to take off the hoses. The hoses from the breather box. And right here, we're going to remove the harness to this sensor. If you follow this hose from the breather box and you go down, and you will see right here, this is actually the throttle body. I'm going to be loosening up the bolt. See this strap right here? I'm going to loosen it up with a flathead screwdriver that goes over the throttle body. And what this does, it will loosen this breather hose, and it will allow me to take the hose off of the throttle body. You might have to wiggle it back and forth, move it up and down, and it comes off and up. And right here is your throttle body. Right here's the throttle body. And as you can tell, that one has been cleaned. That doesn't mean it works, but it has been cleaned. Here, there's going to be one bolt. I want to make sure that it's set to loosen. All right, now I'm going to put this bolt where it can't be lost. I'm going to go ahead and take the top of this off so I can get to this easier. And here's the top of the breather box. This E12 will do it. This is going to come up out of there, and this is the bolt. To the breather, this is what the bolts look like that just came out, and you can see that's an E12 socket. And finally, this will open this room right here and give me room to work, so that I'll be able to disconnect all the hoses and wiring so I can get to this intake. This is what it looks like once the breather box is taken out. Then I'll have access to the side of the intake, and all these hoses and wiring, I'll have way easier access to unhook all of that and to remove it. I'm going to unplug the fuel injectors, and they have a little red clip right here in the middle, and you'll want to push up easily, because if not, you'll break them, and it kind of is a safety part that holds them in place. But anyways, once they're pushed up like that, you can use a flathead screwdriver or a pick. You can it exposes the middle part where there's a plastic tab. You just push that in and pull up and unplug it just like that. And there should be 4, one for each cylinder. There's 3. Do it easy. There's 4. 4th one is unplugged. Right here is the plug-in that's on the left back side of the valve pan. you want to unplug that. Next, I'm going to remove this vacuum line that's going into the valve pan here, just like that. And underneath, beside of it, there will be another plug-in. You just unplug that right there. Okay, a recap is we've unplugged a wire back here. We've unplugged this wire, which is right here. We've unplugged this hose, which is right there. Okay, some of the connectors you might not be able to get to that easily, so I'm using these. Push in the clip and pull up after you get the safety clip. Always look for the safety clips, and then you can see it's going to unplug just like that. No problemo. Now the next thing is the map sensor here, and like I said, its red safety bracket is right there. You push that up and you push the map sensor in and you wiggle it around a little bit. Cut for a second. Okay, so if any of these get stuck, there may be dirt in there and you can blow it out with an air compressor, or you can wiggle it around. But here's the map sensor. It's unplugged. It was pretty dirty. I had to get a lot of dirt off of it, and it comes unplugged from right there. Okay, now I'm going to take these and I'm just going to pull up on this. And what I'm doing, I'm basically unhooking the wiring harness and getting this all out of the way. And that is the fuel injectors and everything else that has to do with this wiring harness. Then I'm going to use this tool. This is a plastic pry tool. And these are on top of the fuel rail bolt. And you can just put that under there and just gently push up. And we're going to want to take this whole harness back this way, out of the way. That's what we're trying to do. And you'll see there's two hoses down here. And I'm going to be pulling them off the intake also. It's kind of hard to get to that one. I'm just going to use the pry tool and pull it up some. You want to be careful when you're pulling this off because you don't want to break anything on the manifold. And you'll see that these two connectors, you'll see these two connectors are now disconnected from the bottom of the intake, the manifold there. And I'm going to lay them to the right. And you can see this wiring harness, how it's just on there from a plastic stand. I'm also going to use the plastic pry tool and push it up that way, back away from the intake. There's also this plug right here. It has a plastic tab that you push in, and then you unplug that. And if you can see this right here, what you couldn't see earlier, this right here, this whole thing right here and here, this is your throttle body. See right here where the throttle body's at, there's a bolt back where my finger is. It's a 13 millimeter, and it's also connected to the throttle body. You're going to have to take all these bolts off, because in essence the throttle body is bolted onto the motor with this bracket. And these are 10mm bolts. And I'm going to take off these 10mm first. These will be the 2 bolts on this bracket. And remember, there's going to be another 2 bolts over here. So there's 4 altogether. I'm going to go ahead and take those out. Now, if you were just changing out the throttle body, then you would be 9/10 of the way home. So you have to make sure it's in front of this bracket here, but this just pops off now. You just pull it forward a little bit, and the throttle body just comes right off. As you can see, this throttle body's been cleaned. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good, but that's how the throttle body comes off. Is the O-ring that fails a lot on these throttle bodies that goes into the intake right there. The key into taking the intake off is this. You're going to have to take the throttle body off because it is connected to this metal plate, and this metal plate is connected to the engine on this 13mm bolt. So take off the throttle body with those 4 10mm bolts. Once you get the throttle body off, you have 5 main bolts remaining. Well, actually 3 bolts and 2 nuts. And here's where they are. From right to left, there's a 13mm nut right here. There is a bolt right here. I believe it's 13. If not, it's a 10. Then we go to the center. There is a bolt here. Then we go to the right, and you take the dipstick out. You will see that there is a bolt down in here. And then to the left, there will be a matching 13 nut right there. So there are 2 nuts and 3 bolts. Now there could be some pressure on this fuel line that goes to this fuel rail. You don't have to take the fuel rail off, but you do have to take this connector off. The trick is you push up, and then you push this quick connect in, and you just pull back, and there was just barely any loose gas, and I'm going to get this over here out of the way and set that up there. So it is now ready to take off those 3 bolts and 2 nuts. What I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be taking the 13mm nuts and bolts off. I'm going to start here on the right, and like I said, there'll be 2 nuts, and all of these are going to be 13mm, by the way. I'm using a 13mm deep well socket, and here is the first nut. I'm going to set it out of the way, and then you can see you have to have an extension. I have a 5-inch extension attached to a 13mm deep well socket. a 13
like
millimeter.
this is a pretty big bolt that's coming out.
Deep well socket. And I can see up under there on the intake that it's not, or that it's loosened up, I can see. And I'm gonna go over here to the middle. Okay, now this is where you would take the dipstick out. There's a 13 millimeter bolt here. Just have patience and perseverance through this. Don't get aggravated. And you notice you don't have to take the fuel rail off. And you will have a little bit of fuel in the fuel rail that's leaking. And what I have done is I went ahead and put a plastic bottle so that the remaining gas that is in the fuel rail will leak into this bottle. And once this is loosening up, as you're loosening the bolts and the nuts, you will see that the intake is getting loose. Okay, that one's loose. And back in here. This will be that second bolt here. Like I said, like I've said a bunch of times, there's 2 nuts and 3 bolts. Somebody on the comments is probably going to say these nuts, but that's okay. There are 2 of them. I'm going to go ahead and let the fuel drain the rest of the way out into the bottle. This next step here is to clean around the gasket, and then the intake should be ready to come off. Just like this. You see, I don't have to move that hose or anything right here. As you see, I'm going to take the old gasket out. It's just going to come off like that, and that's what it's going to look like. This dirt. Ready? Here's what goes bad in these intakes. Put this back on, the flat and you can see it's warped up here and sticking out. And this is completely flat, and it doesn't have these over time little flaps right here. Is going to be this is what down. Goes bad is this gasket on this intake, and we're going to clean all this off. I recommend Fel Pro. We're going to replace this with a MS new intake gasket. 840. That is the part number. This is what it looks like now. I'm going to go ahead and open this. We're going to be cleaning around the perimeter of where the intake seals back on. And I am going to make sure, since I took the gasket out, that it's this is going to be down in when it makes to the engine of the intake. Because this is the whole reason why you're taking this off, is to make sure vacuum leak. You can take this out with a pick, or you can use a small flathead screwdriver. And that's how I'm going to take it out. I'll take out the old one. Looks like the other gasket was just flat because it was worn out right here and through all the channels. And that was allowing the air to just go down in there and get into the engine and messing up the fuel trim. In other words, it was causing the Chrysler crisis. And this right here will fix that lightning bolt. And may it never come back again. And you have power for your car. So I'm going to remove these, and I'm getting ready to go mount this back onto the car. Like I said, this will only fit one. Like I said, this will only fit one way. And now you can see, well, hold on and I will show you. The other gasket was just flat. So what I'm doing first is I'm taking one of the 13mm nuts and I'm getting it started by hand, and then I'm going to do that for the other side. So this is what the engine looks like with this surface being cleaned, and I'm getting ready to slide the intake on and start bolting it down. And just a little bit. So I'm going to put the intake on this snug right here. You want to be careful because right here is where the dipstick goes, and it's going to go up under the intake, under right here where my finger's coming out. Okay, it says it's 18 foot. You slide it down in there. I'm going to go to the first one. Trick. That's the one that's right above. What I'm going to do is a tip, or what I'm going to do is a trick to get this nut to fall, is to put some paper in the socket around this nut to hold it in like that, so it won't fall. Unless, of course, you have a magnetic to the bolt on the left, or the nut on the left. And time for the nut on the right. Okay, it says the torque specs for the intake bolts are 18 foot-pounds. Okay, and that should do it. Okay, now let me get this one. I went from the middle to the right, and then I'm going to go back to the first one. where the dipstick goes. And that sets right on that bolt there and holds the wire down like that. This is hooks to the map sensor, which is right here on the intake. You can hear that click. Then you push the safety button back down. And then we have two sensors down in here. And they will only plug in one way. Tell me when. Okay, what I'm going to do now, since this intake manifold is torqued back down, I'm going to go ahead and start plugging in the big wiring harness that we got out of the way. Start plugging it back in and all of the connectors. Let's not forget the fuel. Make sure that you have these two plastic standoffs. In order to plug it back in, make sure this plastic piece is as far up for this to clip back on. Listen, it's lined up, and it's going to snap. That's on there. Now this right here usually has, and you can see it's not some of this on there. But unfortunately, back in place. In this situation, then we're just going to take this over here. But this stand does go on the middle bolt, down like that. And make sure that you have enough, and as you can see, for it to plug in right here. Plugs in right here in the back. Here. See, just like that. And you'll hear it click into place, then push the safety button down. You'll want to do that with each of these that plug into the fuel injectors. So the next step, make sure that this bracket goes over top of the intake, and there'll be two plastic kind of dial or guide plastic rods coming out. That's how you know if it's lined up and pushed back up against the intake. Yeah, that clicked into place. I'm not torquing these down yet. I'm just getting them on there snug, and I'm going to do them in a crisscross pattern. And we're going to plug, we'll put that on the outside. Okay, there are two connectors down here at the bottom, right here, lower so right of the intake. Get pinched there. And then we're going to take this vacuum hose, the one that's marked blue, plug it back into here. And the smaller of the two is going to go right there, over top that. We're going to put the throttle body back on, and as I'm putting it on, okay, I'm putting the breather box back on. You'll see it takes these E12 sockets by hand at first. So I'm lining it back up and start these down in here by hand. And you can see that does go over that metal bracket. And there's going to be 4 of these in total, and this is and the left one is clipped down. Of course, the right one is not. And then we will have the airflow sensor, and that's clipped on there. And then we're going to connect this hose down into. Okay. Now, you can see it's idling on 7 now and not 1500, and there is no lightning bolt. The check engine light is on due to the ambient temperature sensor, which I'm going to change that. But this has fixed the Chrysler
There's
crisis.
going to be a bigger one that looks like this.
And if you're idling too high, more than likely it is a vacuum leak.
And you just wiggle it back and forth.
And more than likely
until it goes on there good. Be careful
the
putting it back
gasket
on,
to
because
the
you don't want to break
intake
the plastic off of the nozzle off of the intake. Be very careful.
Okay, we went ahead and got a new air filter, and we're going to take the side that has the clips in the back and put those clips in first so that it clips down in there. Then we're going to put this hose, or it's going to go down there. This is broke, but the left one is not. Till next time, I will see you later. This hose